All right, while the latest indictment of former President Trump may give the legacy media an excuse not to cover what came out this past Monday in the Oversight Committee in regard to Hunter Biden's former business partner, Devon Archer, rest assured we here at Washington Watch are keeping an eye on that and waiting for the forthcoming release of the interview transcript that should be coming out any day right now. We'll keep you posted, obviously, when that happens. But in the meantime, we do want to take a look at the latest indictment of former President Trump and unpack it for you. So joining me now to discuss this is Phill Kline, Associate Professor of Law at Liberty University, and also the former Attorney General for the state of Kansas and former District Attorney for Johnson County. I don't know of anyone who can unpack this any better for us than Phill Kline. Phill, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Good to be with you, Jody.
All right, I'd like to go over the charges that have come towards former President Trump in this latest indictment that seems to be an ongoing saga that we're watching. But let's start with this one, the conspiracy to defraud the United States. Can you explain to our viewers and listeners what that means?
Well, essentially, it means that it's an allegation that President Trump, along with others, created a plan to engage in deceit to harm the United States of America. And basically, the factual predicate that Jack Smith puts forth is that Trump knew he was lying when he made claims about the election. He forwarded those claims in order to exert pressure improperly to get others to act inconsistent with their constitutional role and duties as it relates to counting the electoral votes in Washington on January 6th. That is count one.
All right, well, before we go to count two, let me ask you this. That sounds like it's all speculation. How does anyone read someone else's mind and determine intent?
Well, it's more than speculation. It's the weaponization of the Department of Justice, and it's an abuse of law. It is criminalizing a difference of opinion. And essentially, we see that consistently with the Biden administration in their efforts at censorship and in the intimidation they put forward against parents as it relates to school boards and so forth. If you read the indictment, and I think this is real important, Jody, because this has been one of the most expansive investigations in United States history. You have to include the January 6th committee in this, and they subpoenaed and interviewed and really obtained all kinds of information as it relates to their political opponents. Jack Smith, then, in his role as special counsel, has done the same. And the result is, in this indictment, there are no allegations that former President Trump was trying to cause violence, incite violence, plan violence, or do anything along those lines. So basically what you've got is allegations that there are some within his administration who said, look, you lost the election. Trump disagreed with that and decided to try to exercise all of the rights afforded to him by law to ensure a thorough review of the election and also hold on to power if that was appropriate with what they found. And now the Department of Justice is criminalizing that type of conduct.
Wow. Amazing. Well, let's go to some of the other charges that have come his way. There's the conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. What does that mean?
Well, right now it means what Jack Smith says it means, which is unfortunate. The law was passed as a part of Sarbanes-Oxley to prevent the destruction of documents that might have been under subpoena to another party. What you had is an accounting firm destroy documents that their client had been subpoenaed for those documents, and so this law was passed by Congress. It requires a corrupt intent, and this is the barrier that Mr. Smith faces, especially with the United States Supreme Court. I don't know about a D.C. Jury pool and whether they will seriously review whether Mr. Trump had a corrupt intent. Unfortunately, people who disagree with Mr. Trump infer corruption rather than look at the facts and make a determination. So I'm concerned about that D.C. jury pool, but he has to demonstrate, again, the same factual predicate, that effectively Trump was lying to try to gin up this excitement around January 6th to interfere with the counting of the electoral votes in Mr. Pence and what he was going to do. And the concern, if you're a civil libertarian or concerned about the First Amendment, is that what the former President Trump did is argue forcefully that other things and other steps should be taken. That is speech. That's not inciting violence. That's not intimidating people wrongfully. And what the special counsel is saying is that there are other people who agreed with what Trump was saying. And that is there are problems in the 2020 election and the electoral count should not go forward. Now, it's real interesting, Jody. It's almost the same thing that the Democrats said in 2016.
That's
Christine Pelosi led an effort, and in fact, it resulted in violence around the country. And there was intimidation of electors to delay the electoral vote and the certification of the electors because of the Russian collusion claim. So Mr. Smith is walking down a very dangerous path in criminalizing differences of opinion in political speech.
All right, we've only got about a minute left. Will you be able to hold on for our next segment? I'd like to keep you to continue this discussion.
Sure.
But in a minute or less, what about the conspiracy against rights? I mean, what rights are referenced when we're talking about a conspiracy against rights?
Well, in the global sense, the right of the American people through a majority vote in an electoral college to select their president. In a more targeted sense, the exercise of authority by Mr. Pence, the exercise of authority by the electors that were certified within the states. I imagine that that's what we're speaking of. It's a broad category of crime, much of it arising originally in various forms out of Reconstruction in the United States when there were conspiracies to prevent black voters from going to the polls.
All right, let's go to how does the treatment of President Trump right now compare with that of other presidents as it relates to what we are watching?
It's unprecedented, and it's damaging to the country. It strikes at a very core concept that set and has set America apart from the rest of the world, and that is equal protection under the law. And that the law should be applied in the same fashion against all persons. I mentioned to you before the break, Jody, of the Democratic efforts in 2016, and just review that for a second. It was a effort led by Christine Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, to get the Trump electors to violate state law and to vote against their pledge, and also to get the intelligence community of the United States to demand a delay in the certification of the electors, contrary to state law, claiming that Russian collusion needed to be thoroughly investigated. Now, the Russian collusion hoax was initiated by the Clinton campaign, and that's been demonstrated. So here you had the left pushing a lie to try to impede with the electoral count of the vote. And they also organized demonstrations. There was significant loss of property and riots. People were harmed. Police officers were injured. And for about 2 weeks, we had riots in the United States. Now, at that time, the investigation was done properly, and those who were responsible for the violence were prosecuted. But those engaged in aggressive political speech were not, and they shouldn't have been. Now you have the Biden administration, and it's a whole different ballgame. And powers being exercised to harm political opponents.
It sure is a whole different ball game. So you would mark this down as absolutely, number one, unusual for what's taking place, but also politically motivated. That we are watching the unfolding of a weaponized Department of Justice.
Absolutely. And it's been that way for some time. You know, you saw it with the school board. You saw it in election law when the Department of Justice sent out letters to intimidate state legislatures from performing their duty. They have the constitutional duty to understand whether the election was conducted properly. And the Department of Justice sent out a letter frightening state legislatures. You see it as it relates to the document cases and the different treatment between Biden and President Trump. You see it as it relates to Hunter Biden and the Department of Justice engaging in what apparently was misleading the court to try to bring about that plea deal while giving him immunity from any further review. When the evidence just keeps piling up that there's serious concerns there. So that causes a structural weakness in our government because of the lack of faith that people have in our institutions. And it's the type of thing that causes, apologize for that. It's truly unfortunate that there are those willing to go to these lengths to forward a narrative to keep themselves in power.
Well, let me just push a little bit further on that, not push against, but to go deeper into what you're just talking about with just a little bit more broadly, if you will, in terms of these indictments and the other things, the history that you've given. What is your take on how the Department of Justice has been operating and messaging over the last couple of years? You described what they've been doing, but what are they messaging in the midst of all of this?
Well, I mean, what can we interpret or what do they say? What they say is that this is about upholding the law and that they treat everybody equally and the same. But it is apparent that they do not. And if you dig deeper, Jody, and you look into, for example, the conveyance of authority that Attorney General Garland gave to Trump's special counsel and that he gave to the special counsel in the Biden case, you see a dramatic difference. You see a very strict limitation of authority on Biden's special counsel, and you see is a grant of authority to Mr. Smith that basically gives license to go get anybody and everybody affiliated with former President Trump. So it's evident for the American people to see. It's whether that they will act and stop this. And really the only way to stop it is to raise your voice. And then, of course, to exercise your right to vote and make a difference at the polls.
Well, and that's what has to happen. At the end of the day, we have got to take action to stop, to depoliticize and to de-weaponize the Department of Justice, and that starts at the ballot box, but it also continues with keeping our representatives accountable. Thank you, Phill Kline. We appreciate all your incredible work, and thank you so much for taking time to join us this evening on Washington Watch.
My honor. Thank you, sir.